This isn't just high fantasy. This is 2 blunts deep and a bucket of fried chicken high fantasy. Welcome back to StoryToob, everybody. So I'm back with another Malazan video. My third or fourth Malazan video now. Third review, or my general thoughts on a Malazan book, because I have finished Memories of Ice, which is a masterpiece of a book. I don't really throw that word around lightly, but this is a masterpiece of not just fantasy, but of literature, to be honest. This book is really cementing this series of books as something that is just tickling my pickle. And it's grabbed me emotionally now. Very much so. Deadhouse Gate certainly tugged on the heartstrings and got me more emotionally invested than the first book, Gardens of the Moon. Gardens of the Moon was just a rollicking good time. It had everything that I love about fantasy, everything that I think is cool about fantasy, and it teased a lot of stuff to come in terms of the thematic depth and the richness of these books that has really come to the fore now with Memories of Ice. So this review, look, it's probably going to be full spoiler. I'll give you a quick rundown, lowdown, TLDR if anybody who has not read these books is watching these first couple of minutes. But then I'm just going to tell you to fuck off. I'm going to tell you to leave when I get into spoilers, because I need to talk about this book with spoilers. There's too much going on. There's too much that Erickson is trying to say with this book, and there's just so much that I got out of it that I need to talk about the details of that. So here we go. Did I like Memories of Ice? TLDR, non-spoiler fashion. You bet your ass I did. This is a wonderful book. This is an incredible book. It had me hooked, gripped, shackled, chained, glued to the page pretty much from start to finish. And this book is 1,200 pages. Has it cured me of my general belief that no book needs to be over 1,000 pages? I'm not sure yet. Maybe it has, because I was glued to pretty much all of it. Like 95% of it was just riveting. You're always learning something. He doesn't really mince words. He doesn't waste words. Everything has a purpose. Everything has a hidden meaning. There are some things that I feel like, oh, that section felt a bit maybe out of left field, or just a bit wandering over here. But I know it could be one of two things. It could be just that we want to learn a little bit more about this group of people, and he does that well, so I don't mind. It doesn't have to be really interweaving with the grander scheme of things all the time. But also, it's probably something that he's going to pay off way down the line, because the payoff in this book is insane. It's insanity. The man is a mad lad. Steven Erickson, you're a mad lad. So, did I like this book? Yes, I did. I absolutely did. How does it compare to the first two books? Well, Gardens of the Moon was an extremely fun book, and I loved it, and it was the one that I enjoyed the most out of the first two. Deadhouse Gates is probably, technically speaking, the superior book in terms of like thematic stuff and high art literature. I feel like Memories of Ice is a perfect balance between the two of them. So it had all of the fun stuff and the fantasy wonder and awe of that first book of Gardens of the Moon, and that sort of like relentless mystery and intrigue, and I want to learn more about this world, and I want to learn more about this bit of lore. So much world building in this book, so much intriguing imagination as well. And it also had the perfect blend of everything that I found interesting and captivating and thought-provoking thematically from Deadhouse Gates. So I kind of found that Memories of Ice was a perfect mix of the two books, and it was kind of perfect. Do I have any criticisms of it? My gut wants to say it's 1,200 pages, and I don't usually read books that are this long. Did it feel that long? Sometimes it did, but it didn't feel quite as long as Dead House Gates, even though Dead House Gates is like 300 pages shorter. So look, length is subjective as well. I don't really know if I have any criticisms of it at all, because the emotional weight that I felt reading this one, even more so than Dead House Gates, and I know a lot of people find the ending of that book like an emotional dagger to the heart, but I just found that Memories of Ice really captured me on a much, much deeper level than Dead House Gates. But like I said, it was a perfect blend between the first two books. All of the fun, all of the fantasy, intrigue and wonder and awe and structure as well, and the compelling pacing of it. Add to that the richness of the theme and the poetic nature and the sort of symbolic nature with which he writes. This one is off the charts. 10 out of 10. I can't believe I read a book like this, to be honest. I'm filming this pretty soon after finishing it, so like the hype is still here, but you want a raw reaction, here you go. This is a raw reaction. And I'm going to start talking about spoilers. So that's my general overall thoughts about this book. It acts as a nice little loop, a nice little bookend to the first three books, with a great last chapter, great last line. And it's a nice little bookend, I think, to what feels like the first arc, or maybe the introductory arc of this 10-book series. And I'm extremely glad to all of the people that have influenced me to read this book and pushed me to read the Malazan Book of the Fallen. I'm not going to shout out everybody. You guys know who you are. And I've done that, I think, in previous videos. So, yeah, look, I need to talk about the specifics of this book. So, if you haven't read it, vacate the premises now, and I'll get into it. So I'm aware that everybody talks about the main theme of the Malazan Book of the Fallen being compassion. And of course, it is very obviously the main message of this book in particular, and I think the previous book as well. Gardens of the Moon is the foundation of that for me. It really comes to the fore in Memories of Ice, and not just in a thematic sense or in a metaphorical sense, in quite a literal way. Compassion literally plays a crucial role in the resolution of a lot of the plot threads in Memories of Ice. And to get directly into spoilers, I feel like the embodiment of this theme is Itkovian. I can never remember. Slightly dyslexic about that. Itkovian. I had to look it up on my phone there. I still don't really understand the rules around, you know, who ascends and all this kind of stuff. I don't think it really matters either. I'm sure I'll learn more of it as I go along. But it felt like Itkovian. God, I can't pronounce the name. It felt like Itkovian kind of ascended to this godlike state of compassion. He was the embodiment of that theme, and he, of course, I actually thought for a while that he would end up being the summoner of the Talana Mass, and then when he stands and he does this Jude Bellingham moment of this, any football fans, real football fans, will know what I'm talking about. He embraces the Talana Mass and takes all of their sorrow away in this like selfless act that ultimately kills him. He is the embodiment of this theme, this ultimate selfless sacrifice that he makes, that of course we get the foreshadowing of it. We get the first initial bit of it in the Siege of Kapistan. This overarching theme of compassion obviously is just drilled home with the resolutions of most of the subplots in this. I don't know how to say it. Is it the Meba? The mother of Silver Fox. So when she gives birth to Tattersail reincarnated with Bellerdan and Nightchill in there as well. Silver Fox, her mother, I think embodies the two main themes of this book. So compassion as well, obviously, but also parenthood, which I find is equally the dominant theme in this book. And one as well that I'll talk about in a little bit is balance. Balance in life, emotional balance, psychological balance, spiritual balance, balance in society, balance in relationships, balance in the way we talk to each other. All of that kind of thing, I feel, is the real. It's almost like the individual cards holding up the house of cards, and the house of cards altogether is, compassion and parenthood in this book. So to use another shape, I guess, this book is a house of cards, which I guess is apt given the whole deck of dragons and all that kind of thing. And Erickson himself is a fan of symbolism and that kind of mirroring and that kind of poetic little winking that he likes to do. But the Amoeba, I think, is just a wonderful, wonderful character, a really refreshing character. One of my favourite characters in this book for sure, easily. Much the same with Fellison and Deadhouse Gates. I find that they really, the heart of the book is in there, and what he's really trying to say is in there. This idea of parenthood and the toll that it takes, that it's not always easy, but the love is unconditional. She gives birth to Silver Fox, and Silver Fox is quite literally sucking the life out of her. There's a fear of abandonment, and Silver Fox matures. As she matures, she gets into her sort of teenage angst phase, and she leaves her mother and causes her mother great pain. And this is a universal feeling, whether you're a child or whether you're a parent. I don't have kids yet myself, but I can imagine that being the thing, and I've experienced this with my own parents. I'm sure everybody has. You leave the nest, you flee to forge your own path, forge your own way forward, and maybe it's not initially obvious what that path is, and it's not initially obvious to your parents what that path is. And I feel like this whole storyline was about that. But this is also mirrored in a lot of other things as well. And I don't think it's just motherhood that is the theme here. It's parenthood. And you can see this even with Anomander Rake in the Tistiandi, where he is a fatherly figure to that race. And he has to be this sort of stoic parent that gives his children something to live for. And by the end, they kind of do have something to live for. And you can see this respect and admiration for the Malazan army that they join forces with in this book. You can see it by the end when, for example, when they give them Coral, the final city that they win back from the Panyan Domin, and there's this idea that they have something to live for now. They build this new city alongside the Malazans. Also with the matron of the Keychain Shemal, I don't know how to say it, Keychain Chevy. You see it with the matron there, and there's all of this symbolism around the embrace, the mother's embrace. It's a suffocating thing for the child, but it's also a loving thing. And it's something that the children are always trying to escape, but underneath it all, underneath all the bravado and the wanting to do your own thing, you still crave that mother's embrace. But this is kind of littered throughout the book. The same with Deadhouse Gates and this sort of cycle, this cyclical repetition of mistakes and that kind of thing. With Byrne, basically the mother of the world. You have Mother Dark, the mother of the Tistiandi. You have Anomander Rake being a parent, a father figure to the Tistiandi and having to lead them as if he were their father. You have even the fucked up side of things, the dark side of things with the children of the Dead Seed and the Teniscowry. And the Teniscowry as well, I'll talk about them in a second. They're a commentary on other things like orcs in fantasy. What's up everybody, editing Carlos here. I'm having a beer editing the video, and I just remembered that I did not mention the Teniscowry. So I really love the fact that the Teniscowry to me seem almost like a commentary on orcs and how the theme that everybody talks about of compassion obviously is really well displayed with the Teniscowry, and the fact that they then get assimilated into the Grey Swords at the end, and how even though they've caused so much death and destruction and cannibalism among their so-called enemy, they're taken under the wing of the enemy at the end, and because they recognize that they were enslaved, much like the orcs in Lord of the Rings, where instead of Aragorn popping up and going, let's go hunt some orc, and at the end when the ring is destroyed, they all also just run off and are destroyed, or at the end of Two Towers they run off and are eaten by all the trees in Fangorn. In Memories of Vice, we realize that these people were enslaved and tortured and mutilated and forced into a life they didn't want, and they have to almost be rehabilitated into society, and that they do that. They are given the chance to do that. Also, as just a nice little touch commentary on fantasy itself. The children of the Dead Seed and Aster, who the moment that security blanket, that rock of the parent is taken away from Aster, he crumbles. He doesn't know what he's living for anymore because he's suffocated. But yeah, like the dark side of parenthood being such a difficult thing that parents literally give their lives to it, so that their children can rise up. I'd found this a fascinating aspect of Memories of Ice, and it gave such emotional depth, similar to Deadhouse Gates with, Mappo and Icarium and this kind of cyclical nature, and Felicin just self-destructing, and the chain of dogs almost biting its own tail. This kind of self-destructive cycle I found with Memories of Ice, it just got me that little bit more with the theme of parenthood. And also with like Itkovian and the Grey Swords, he kind of does act like, I need to shepherd these people almost like a father, and he hands them off to a mother figure at the end. It's littered throughout the book, and it was a wonderful underlying theme that is echoed in pretty much all of the subplots throughout the book. It gave such emotional resonance to it. There were a lot of paragraphs that I was reading and, mirroring it to my own life and my own relationship with my parents. And I was not expecting that with a Malazan book, to be perfectly honest with you. So this isn't just a great work of fantasy. This is a great work of literature, because a lot of that stuff is subtle. A lot of it is not so subtle, but even if you're not looking for it, if you don't realize it, it's absolutely fine, because the story around it is still so compelling and engaging, and it's fun. The book is really, really, really fun. And the other theme that I think is equally, alongside compassion and parenthood, the thing that really, really stood out to me is balance. Balance in life. Balance in perspective. Emotional balance. Being at peace, or searching for that peace, whether it's spiritual peace, emotional peace, peace in relationship, peace in your life, something along those lines. I felt this was permeating the whole book throughout it, and it was kind of the book itself. The book is perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
What struck me the most, and generally the books that I love the most throughout my life, are those ones that find that balance and strike that line that is so hard to find between the light and the dark, between seriousness and levity, between dour depression and humor, between cruelty and compassion. This book defined this. It epitomized that idea, but also in the individual stories themselves and the themes, it's all about balance. Erikson is trying to, I assume, talk to us about balance. And compassion is an inherent part of that theme as well. And I kind of felt like this metaphor, it could be applied on a huge grander scale, like he did with Deadhouse Gates and history and burying things, that is also dragged into Memories of Ice. And you can think about it on a large scale and balance in civilization, balance in empire, the way in society we just go from one extreme to the other in the name of progress or advancement, and we never really stop to consider that there's no balance to what we're doing. And that is a large abstract concept that us as individuals we can't really comprehend, but it starts with the small things, and he also brings it to a small scale human level with some of the characters where Itkovian is just trying to find peace. He's trying to find that balance in his purpose. And I think this theme really came to the forefront of my mind when Paran enters the realm, or Dragnapur again, and he visits that cart of chains where people are trapped, and he talks to Draconis. And again, it's more of he brings in the theme that came up in Deadhouse Gates of, we bury our mistakes, we bury our past, we bury the knowledge that we learn from. And this happens in society where, in the name of progress, we're so quick to forego and forget knowledge that we've gained along the way and move on from that because it's outdated, instead of considering things that civilization and society have learned in the past. And then we behave like, we're just an all-knowing, far superior version of ourselves now because we have this new knowledge. But we forget the old knowledge, and we're quick to discard it, and we're quick to bury it and kick it into the dirt. And when Paran goes to talk to Draconis, I kind of feel like this is what they're talking about. And I'm going to try find the page and read a little bit of it. And he uses this idea of the order and the chaos, and how we try to correct chaos with order, but then it's too much order, and we almost chain ourselves in too much order, and we just don't know how to go away from one extreme without going to the other end of that spectrum. And I find it's a fascinating thing to think about. This book really tapped into that idea in my mind, and I was left considering this after almost every chapter. Yeah, so for example, like when Paran goes, I'm going to read this a little bit if I can. So Draconis says to Paran, "Darkness has ever warred against chaos, mortal, ever retreated, and each time that Mother Dark relented to the coming of light, to the birth of shadow, her power has diminished, the imbalance growing more profound. Such was the state of the realms around me in those early times, a growing imbalance, until chaos approached the very gate to corral Ghislaine itself. A defense needed to be fashioned, souls were required. Wait, please, I need to think. Chaos hungers for the power in those souls, for what Dragnapur has claimed. To feed on such power will make it stronger, 10-fold, 100-fold, sufficient to breach the gate. Look to your mortal realm, Ganos Paran. Devastating, civilization-destroying wars, civil wars, pogroms, wounded and dying gods. You and your kind progress at a perilous rate on the path forged by chaos. Blinded by rage, lusting for vengeance, those darkest of desires. Wait, where history means nothing. Lessons are forgotten. Memories of humanity, of all that is humane, are lost. Without balance, Ganos Paran. But you want me to shatter Dragnapur? Ah, now I understand your resistance to all that I say. Mortal, I have had time to think, to recognize the grave error I have made. I had believed, Ganos Paran, in those early times, that only in darkness could the power that is order be manifested. I sought to help Mother Dark, for it seemed she was incapable of helping herself. She would not answer. She would not even acknowledge her children. She had withdrawn, deep into her own realm, far from all of us, so far that we could not find her. Before the houses there were holes. Before holes there was wandering. In your own words, yes? But you were both right and wrong. not wandering, but migration, a seasonal round, predictable, cyclical. What seemed aimless, random, was in truth fixed, bound to its own laws, a truth, a power I fail to recognize. So the shattering of Dragnapur will release the gate once more to its migration, to what gave it its own strength to resist chaos, yes. So, to me, there's so much depth to this. You could take it as just the subplot in this fantasy book about wanting to restore balance between order and chaos and having to destroy the magic sword and the soul and whatever. But this metaphor could be applied to anything. Like I said, it could be applied on a huge grand scale to civilization, to empires, to how we advance from one form of government to another without finding a real balance in between. And even when there is balance, we get bored of it and we want to move on to something more radical. And we don't realize how dangerous that path is until it's too late. And we bury the lessons that we've learned in history. But also on a more personal level, you could apply this to discourse, debate. People wanting all the time to be on the right side of the discourse and doing it aggressively, sometimes violently, often violently. And we can't find that balance, that agreement, that willingness to listen, and especially listen to what is difficult. And I think this is another thing that he taps into a lot, that even compassion is difficult. And inherent in compassion is the ability to listen. And we lose this time and time again in society. And you can apply this to anything, like online discourse. This is a perfect example for online discourse, but even just political discourse throughout history, and even more so now with social media. You want to be on the right side, but you want to be so far on the right side, on the side of good, on righteousness, that you refuse to listen to any question or any perspective. And we've always been like that. And I just found that a really interesting thing to ponder with this book. And it came out in even some of the story. This idea of we're chaining ourselves again. You could even look at it and apply it to like capitalism. How capitalism was forged as a sort of a non-authoritarian, non-dictatorship way of governing, of society, looking after its own and working for its own merit and earning its own keep. But look at where we've gotten with capitalism now, where this semblance of order and freedom has almost shackled us because shit is so expensive. We gotta work 40 hours a week, 5 days a week, and then we gotta recover for the other 2 days before we do it all again. And we can't actually afford anything because rent is too expensive, shit is too expensive. We're on the cusp of another cycle of reaching that extreme. And we struggle to find a balance because people refuse to listen and people refuse to question this stuff. And all of that is extremely deep and extremely maybe far-fetched for some people who don't see that when they read this book. And I didn't expect to be talking about this, reviewing a third book in a fantasy series. But this is what this book made me think about. So it's an incredible book. It unleashed my imagination. It tapped into questions that I have on a personal sort of philosophical level. But the beauty of this book is you don't need to do that to enjoy it because it's a fun time. It really, really is a fun time. This is a dark book as well, and it's a sad book. Sad things happen, but there's a beauty in it. And he's not afraid to have fun. I was laughing my ass off for a lot of this book. And I have not mentioned this character in my previous 2 videos, but I think Krupp is my favorite character in these books. And I'm not really sure how the online Malazan fandom are going to react to that. I'm sure you'll all tell me in the comments one way or the other whether you hate him or whether you love him. But, and this is going to sound strange, I identify so strongly with Krupp. I have gotten so much comfort and joy when he appears on the page and other characters' reactions to him. Krupp is the epitome and the definition of a character who is kind, intelligent, doesn't take himself too seriously, so therefore has a bit of a joke, wants to make people laugh, brings a smile to the face, but is eternally underestimated, sometimes to the detriment of the people around him and sometimes to his own detriment, to be honest, as well. And I really latch on to this because I'm a person who doesn't take himself too seriously. I joke around a lot, and in my daily life, especially more so in my professional life, this is sometimes a hindrance when people think I'm an idiot. And that's fine, but there's that inability or unwillingness to listen and to take a moment and have a bit of patience and consider a perspective, another perspective, and another way of going about things. And I think Krupp is a wonderful vessel for that idea in these books, because he is eternally underestimated. He doesn't outwardly boast and show off his intellect or his strength, so therefore we don't admire him. In fact, we find him annoying. So editing me again. This, I didn't quite mention as well that this is kind of about, like, you know, kindness being seen as a weakness, or levity being seen as something that is a hindrance to progress, or it's not taken seriously, and how if you don't, and this is absolutely relevant to especially today's society, with social media, with capitalism, with corporate culture, with whatever, with always doing hard work, which is a very American mentality, to be fair. As a European person, that's a entirely different conversation, but that kind of thing with social media is changing. And if you don't outwardly display either physical strength or intellect or a serious approach to hard work, you're not taken seriously at all, in the slightest, because we don't value levity, we don't value fun. It's not valuable. It doesn't produce anything. It doesn't make money. It doesn't expand an empire. It doesn't gain you an upper hand in a war of expansion like it does in Malazan. So yeah, that kind of idea really resonates with me, and I just wanted to reiterate that point. He maybe highlights people's insecurities. They take themselves so seriously, and he's going around the place, having a laugh, having a bit of a joke, taking a piss, and people don't like that. People want to feel secure in the way they approach life, and Krupp is the antithesis of that almost. But he's not doing it out of arrogance, and I just really, really relate to that a lot. That it's not an arrogant thing, and he's not doing it to be annoying. He's doing it because life is more fun that way, and he can bring a smile to people's face. And every once in a while, he'll show his true self and is incredibly kind. And I just love Krupp. And this was especially prevalent with his relationship with the Amoeba, so the mother. What he did for the mother, the compassion that he showed for her in this book, especially when she was dying. There's a scene early on, or maybe halfway through the book, where she's having a dream and she's in pain. She's feeling her body withering away. And Krupp appears in her dream, where he can travel these dream worlds. And he's far more powerful than people give him credit for. I think people start to cop on in this book as well, though. But he appears to her and he gives her a trinket. Some copper or something like that, I don't really remember. But he says, just keep going. Something to that effect. I don't remember his exact words. But he's like, he says to her, he tells her to keep going without really saying it in those words. And he gives her this trinket that will kind of has healing properties or something. And he shows her complete kindness. And his buffoonish facade comes down quite often in this book. And I really, really loved that. And it really resonated with me as well. he tugged on my heartstrings quite a lot in this book, more so even when Deadhouse Gates. And I loved that. And that whole theme of balance and just listening to different perspectives, and maybe you will learn a little bit of patience, and your compassion will grow, your capacity for it will grow with that. And I love that. Another example is Anomander Rake is also one of my favorite characters, and it feels somewhat basic to be like, oh yeah, the big cool guy with the cool sword on the floating city in the sky. I think every time he opens his mouth, I think it's cool. But in this one, there's so much more depth that is given to Anomander Rake. And obviously I mentioned his sort of parental relationship with the Tistiandi, but also his friendship, and very unexpected friendship, with Whiskey Jack in this book was a beautiful thing. I love their conversations. I love the respect that they gain for each other, because he's such an old being that he is a patient person and he wants to listen. But Whiskey Jack also shows that willingness to converse with somebody who should kind of be an enemy. And they form this unlikely bond, and it's a beautiful, beautiful friendship. It's a short one, obviously, because Whiskey Jack dies in the end. And that is a heartbreaking scene. I found the deaths in this book, in my opinion, they hit me way harder than in Deadhouse Gates. The way Rake responds to the death of Whiskey Jack and a good chunk of the bridge burners is beautiful, and it shows this respect. It shows this need for friendship in hard times, and the importance of that, and the importance of having friends outside of your circle as well, and letting those other perspectives into your circle. It's a beautiful, beautiful book, honestly. I just thought it was a wonderful thing that he said he wanted them to be buried on Moonspawn when they send Moonspawn out into the sea. And Whiskey Jack is buried on Moonspawn. It's just a nice little symbolic, poetic touch of those bridge burners and their captain are buried in what should have been the enemy territory. But because of this friendship that was formed, bonds are formed and bridges are built, not burned. And it's a nice lesson. It's a nice thing to learn from. Will people learn from it? There's 7 more books or 6 more books. I don't think so. Aside from the themes, I wanted to talk about how fun this book is. Because aside from some of the obviously heavy emotional scenes, the last few hundred pages of the book with the death of Itcovey and the death of Whiskey Jack, the harrowing resolution to the Pannion storyline, and obviously the selfless kind of compassion that they show, they this idea of redemption as well. They let the seer redeem himself. They sent him on a path, which, by the way, I didn't mention before, that whole idea of parenthood and redemption and compassion is all set up at face value in the prologue. And that twist as well of he was the Jagged, one of the 2 Jagged children that Kilava sent into the Warren in the prologue. It just gave this book a nice full circle, satisfying feeling, and it made the sad moments more poignant and more beautiful, that they're lessons to be learned. But anyway, the fun aspect of this book is that it's everything that I want in a fantasy. It really is. And I said this in the first video that I made, and this just reaffirms it. This is just an incredibly fun series of books. The character interactions, the pairings of characters that you've grown fond of or that are introduced in this book, even just to name a few, the early interactions between Itcovian and Hetton. Hetton is a hilarious character. I love how she gets another little nod in at the end of the book with Tool when Onos Tulan walks away. Another beautiful scene. He walks away as a mortal with his sister, and Hetton comes up to him and is like, I see you haven't bedded a woman in a long time. I love that. Little touches of humour, little touches of winking at the reader. This consistent just life is also to be enjoyed, even in the darkest of times. And I love that message because I fundamentally believe in it. But these character pairings like Itkovian and Hetton, or Itkovian and Gruntle towards the latter half of the book, is just brilliant. And then Whiskey Jack and Anomander Rake, Tok and Tool form a wonderful, beautiful kinship. And it's a beautiful scene at the end when Tok is now inhabiting Anaster's body, and Tool rests his hand on his leg and says, "Know that you live in my memory, brother," or something like that. It's just beautiful. And there's an emotional payoff that comes towards the end because you go through this roller coaster of emotions. He takes you through the light and the dark. He takes you through the seriousness and the levity and the humour. The book is riddled with humour, far more humour than in Deadhouse Gates, I found. So, in a sense, it's sad, it's emotional, but it's also really fun to read. And then just the fantasy elements that we all love to read about, with dragons and demons and a rabid horde of cannibals fighting a war, and all the cool battle scenes, and the guy with the big sword in his back who swings it, and he the sword and sorcery idea of this sword that claims souls, and all this badass stuff is littered throughout the book. And it acts as a wonderful almost platter that all of that other stuff is served on. And some of the romance as well, like with Whiskey Jack and Corlat, I found that to be the first time really that Stephen Erickson has written a romance that I really buy. It's my one criticism probably so far of the books, is I haven't really bought any of the romances yet, but Whiskey Jack and Corlat, he really sold me on that and really got me in the feels, as the kids be saying, when Whiskey Jack died and you see Corlat's reaction. That really, really got to me because it was genuine, it was real, it was human, and maybe he'd just practiced it a bit more since Gardens of the Moon. I mentioned as well, like, the rule of cool. Erickson is not afraid to have fun, and he's not afraid to make it fucking cool. And this rule of cool is something that I find in the Red Rising books, that maybe sometimes it might be a little too much. I don't know if it's too much, but that sense of epicness that is so prevalent in the Red Rising books, it makes those books so fun to read, and also gives it an emotional weight, but a feeling of grandiose epicness. Erickson is just on another level. For example, as the book progresses and, people are sort of traveling and there's battles here, and then they arrive at the Siege of Capistan. The Siege of Capistan is so riveting to read, and you get the unfolding of Itkovian's storyline and the hints, and that's where I started to kind of pick up that, maybe he's going to have a bigger role with the Talana Mass, maybe he's the summoner. I'm still a little bit unclear on whether he was the summoner or not. I think it wasn't that important in the end anyway, but the way the pacing just feels to get more relentless as the book progresses, and the little POV sections before the line breaks get shorter. But then when he wants to reveal something epic, he then goes from shorter sentences to one word, and it's just epic as fuck. It's so effective. And I want to read a little page here just to give you an example of this, because it's fucking cool. This is towards the very end. The waters of the harbour had grown glass smooth beneath the dark, now motionless air. The web of ropes spanning it, with its shacks and dangling lines and withered corpses, suddenly trembled. In Hood's name, what's? Shh! Oh, abyss, watch. And he did. The glass-smooth waters of the harbour shivered, swelled, bulged. Then impossibly fled on all sides. Black, enormous something rising from the depths. Seas thrashed, a ring of foam racing outward. A sudden push of cold wind hammered the parapet, made the structure sway, then tremble. Rock, ragged, scarred, a hood-damned mountain, rising from the harbour, lifting the vast net with it. And the mountain grew larger, rose higher, darkness bleeding from it in radiating waves. They've unveiled Corrald Ghislaine, Quickben shouted. All of them. Paran stared. Moonspawn. Rising. Rake hit it. Oh, abyss below did Rake hide it. Rising water, descending down its battered sides in tumbling falls, into the mist that flowed as the edifice climbed ever higher. The cut, Ortnall's cut, that chasm. Look, Quickben hissed, those cracks. And now he saw the cost of Rake's gambit. Huge fissures scarred the face of Moonspawn, fissures from which water still poured in undiminished volume, rising. 2/3 now clear of the churned seas, slowly spinning, bringing into view, high on one side, a ledge, where stood a lone figure. Ugh. That's epic as fuck. Also, again, instead of me over-explaining some of the humour and some of the cheekiness of these books, I'm just going to read, I want to read one of my favourite introductions of a character in these couple of books, and I love the way he does this. And there's another writer as well who does this extremely effectively and with a sort of a cheeky sense of humour, and that's Josiah Bancroft. He does this wonderfully in Senlin Ascends as well. But there's a scene where we're introduced to another Marine and the Bridge Burners, and I'm going to read this bit, and it shows this sort of levity. I'm not taking myself too seriously, but it's still clever. Toes had earned his name by habit of collecting toes among the enemy's dead, whether he'd personally been responsible for killing them or not. He had concocted some kind of drying powder with which he treated his trophies before sewing them onto his vest. The man smelled like a crypt in dry weather, like a pauper's pit before the lime when it rained. He claimed to be a necromancer, and that some disastrously botched ritual in the past had left him oversensitive to ghosts. They followed him, he would assert, adding that by cutting off their mortal toes, he took from all the ghosts a sense of balance, so that they fell down so often that he was able to leave them far behind. That's just a hilarious way to introduce a character, and you immediately get a sense of who this person is. Unfortunately, they don't last long, but that cheeky sense of humour that I love about Erikson as well. These books just work for me because they have all of that thematic depth and richness and things to ponder and think about and discuss, but they also have that sense of fun and wonder and awe and intrigue. And I love that he doesn't over-explain things. He just peppers in a little nugget here for something that makes me want to keep turning the page and learning more about the world. And also that sense of humour, that sense of cheeky fun, that little wink at you that I really appreciate, because honestly, that's just what works for me in everything, to be honest. In my life, in the things I like reading, in the things I enjoy watching. It's just, this is a book that worked for me on almost every level. So I loved it. I don't know how coherent this video has been. I don't know if I even addressed plot points that people want me to address, but this is just what this book has made me feel, what this book has made me think about, all of the things that were simmering under the surface with the story and really, really came to the front here at the end of the book, and gave it a nice little bookend with loads of nuggets for me to keep going. I love that the Bridge Burners got their sort of severance package at the end, and then they go off and they turn a church into a pub, which is exactly what I would do. I love the little nugget at the end of Duaker getting resurrected after Deadhouse Gates and coming in and telling them the story of the chain of dogs in the last line. It acted as a nice little bookend to the first 3 books. And this has been one of my favourite experiences reading, not just fantasy books, but books in general, to be honest. So I'm really grateful to have finally started these books, and I'm going to continue on. If you didn't watch our Month of Philip tribute video to Philip Chase, Dr. Fantasy, I'm going to be reading House of Chains in May. So stay tuned for more reactions to Malazan videos. I'm sure I've missed a ton of stuff. You're just getting a bit of word vomit from me today. I'm sure at some stage I could do a discussion video with somebody out there, and we can go through the specifics of the plot points, but this is just sort of unfiltered thoughts about this book from me. I loved it. 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5, whatever fucking rating you want to throw on a slap on it. That's it. I loved it. So, again, I'll catch up with you guys soon when I get into House of Chains. I'll make another video in a month or two, depending on how long it takes me to read that. I usually don't blast through or binge series in this way, but that in itself is some of the highest praise I can give Erickson, and also some of the highest praise I can give him is I wish I'd written these books myself. I don't think I'd be capable of doing it, and I don't know how he does it. I also don't know how he did it so quickly. Anyway, like the video if you liked it. I tried to be somewhat coherent. If you followed along to the end, I appreciate it. If you were not already subscribed, do consider subscribing. I'll be getting to House of Chains soon. And again, drop down in the comments. Start talking to me about Memories of Ice, because this is an endlessly fascinating book. An endlessly fun book as well. Packed full of emotional depth. And I want to hear what you guys think about it as well. I am now also going to start reading reviews online, watching videos. I've unlocked a load of YouTube content for myself now. Discussions and such to deep dive into this book. So I'm going to go do that now. And I'll see you guys when I get to House of Chains. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, all that bullshit. See ya.